Welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chaney podcast. I am your host today, Nathan Chaney, and today we're going to talk about what goes on between the dock doors and the yard gate at major distribution facilities around the country, and that is yard operations. Well, we're going to have Matt Yearling on, and he's really building something new and innovative in this space at YMX Logistics, and I'm really interested to dig into this topic. But before we do, Matt, can you take a minute to kind of give a little bit of your story and what you are all about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great to connect again, Nathan. Thank you for the invite and the opportunity to talk about this a little bit more. I'm originally from the UK. Spent most of my working career, in fact, most of my life, actually here stateside. My background is enterprise software solutions, and so I've gone through many different industries. Really focused on ERP, CRM, security. Supply chain is the area that I've been spending most of my career on from a technology enablement perspective. And within that context of that, it's really been focused around nodes on a supply chain network, right? So marine terminals, intermodal, manufacturing, distribution. That's kind of been my key focus. And, marine terminal operations, terminal operating systems, yard management systems, things like that. That's really what has been my core focus. Which leads me up to, what YMX is all about. This was founded based on the premise that, to drive maximum value, you really need to have a broader perspective on what actually transpires within the yard. And so this is a very focused logistics services company focused on driving yard operations in a totally different way, and obviously embracing all of the relevant technology enablement to make that work and optimize much more effectively than anybody else can do it, right? And so that's really what YMX is focused on. And when we say technology, it includes sustainability, electrification, autonomy, AI, all the buzzwords, right? All the word salad of technology enablement. It includes all of that under the umbrella of what we're doing for maximum value for our customers.
I see. I see. I think that so much of what we see when we interact on a day-to-day basis with just the world, we see trucks and we see a lot of trucks. Like we all have to move on the roads. So I think whenever we think about logistics and supply chain, we think a lot about the things that connect nodes. And I think that you really are one of the first people I think that I've ever heard that said, I kind of want to be a specialist in the node space. And that's where my area of expertise is. That's really cool to kind of have picked and selected that lane to master. Can you kind of dive into maybe what about that appeals most to you?
Well, because people don't. There's when you look at the opportunity, it's an area that not a lot of people understand, and not a lot of people understand the relevant problems associated with it. It is a blind spot between transportation and warehousing, but in the scheme of things, strategically, if I'm a shipper, and if you pick a relevant example, typically a large shipper would have more than $1 billion spend on transportation, maybe $500 million spend on warehousing, and then maybe 50, 60 million on yard operations, yard logistics in totality, right? In terms of what that means. But just because you're spending a small amount doesn't mean it doesn't have the impact. And then traditionally what people don't understand is that it lacks technology enablement. There's a lot of unsophistication associated with it, but it has a huge impact, right? Because it is that blind spot between the four fences and the four walls of the facility. And especially in North America, where we are very, drop centric in terms of dropping loads, right? It's not live load centric, it's very drop centric. That's where, some of the opportunities lie in terms of what does it mean? Because ideally, what you want is, no impedance mismatch between transportation and warehousing. The goods automatically flow into the warehouse without anybody touching it, right? It's teleported into the warehouse. But that's not the reality. And so what do you do to really address that? And so when you look at the dynamics of the market and you look at the dynamics of node on the network, whether or not that's maritime, rail, truck, it's very clear where the opportunity is. And that's very clear from our perspective why it makes sense. This is not a service that we would bundle into other services. This is, we are specialists. So what does that mean? Well, and this, Nathan, I don't have to tell you this. I think the best strategy for enterprise is best of breed solutions, whether or not that's transportation management, warehouse management. It's get the best solution that's going to be aligned and fit for my business. And so that's what we're focusing on. We're a very specific 3PL or logistics services provider that's very focused on yard operations. And that differentiates us pretty much from any 3PL that's out there because they don't understand it. And pretty much, it enlightens, the current shippers that are insourcing that today to say, well, maybe there is a better option for me to do this. Maybe there is somebody that I can engage to take me to the next level in terms of this. Maybe I do have issues that I haven't really addressed or looked at before. I've gone through this transportation effort. I've gone through this warehousing, ASRS deployment or whatever it is. And now the area that's kind of like, I don't know is the yard, right? Mm-hmm. What do I do? So I'm having these conversations and my team's having this conversation every day, with big companies because it is still not solved. And that's our opportunity.
I like it. It sounds like you've given that pitch once or twice. Let's maybe back up because one of the things that I really want to try to capitalize on and focus a little bit of time on in this sort of setting on my podcast is to learn about the people and the human behind the supply chain, whether it's a small startup or a major corporation in the space. I want to try to hear the stories, the genesis of where these people came from that kind of got them their early exposure and influences to do what they do today. So can you kind of like back us up a little bit to Matt the Younger back in the UK and kind of talk to us a little bit about your formative years?
Yeah, so I was actually trained to be an electrical engineer. So I was actually an electrical engineer working for the Ministry of Defense, working on naval vessels, right? So I've touched many different aspects of electrical engineering, whether or not that's the main run gang, doing the main runs, having fault tolerance, right, around the cabling in a ship. If a bomb hits one cable, you've still got backup. So there's that. You've got control systems. You've got weapon control systems. You've got even the electrical associated with a galley. You wouldn't believe the amount of wiring and the heat that you have to deal with within that context. So that was my background. That was my training. So then what happened was I had the opportunity to go into computers, and the initial step was, hey, when a ship comes in and we have to refit it, what is that Gantt chart look like? And if you can imagine what that looks like, it's pretty complicated. It's like, okay, hey, we need to refurbish. We take all the electrical equipment off. We refurbish some. We replace with new. We deploy new systems, whether or not it's weapon systems or whatever. And what does that look like? And you can imagine you couldn't print out the Gantt chart associated with that. Well, that system actually was on a very large distributed database Oracle system. And so that's really how I got into computers and technology. And very specifically, I became a database expert. So I became I got in very deep within the databases, and within a couple of years, I was working for Oracle. So the company that I worked for the most for 15 years is Oracle, and that's really what transported me over from the UK, right? And then beyond that, really focusing on delivering enterprise services. So, the whole movement to deliver SaaS solutions, right? Cloud-based solutions there was a whole lot of effort associated with that, and especially Oracle knew how to redefine itself, right? Now it's redefining itself as an AI company. Well, they're providing all of the infrastructure associated with it. But, going through all of those waves is just being tremendous. And so when you look at a very traditional industry like supply chain and the application of technology, it's massive. It's massive. And so that's really, when I look at this, and the opportunity of doing something different, understanding, what it means to orchestrate trailers within a facility, but then, apply that in a completely different way, in a refreshing way, owning all of the assets, drivers, the technology, people, processes associated with doing that. It's been something I wanted to do for at least the past 10 years, because I saw the opportunity and the impact that we could provide to the largest companies in the world. And so that's really, for me, this is kind of like, I would never believe that I would actually get into this situation, and with a team, because this is a team sport. We've got the best talent associated with understanding this use case from a number of different perspectives. We're not operator. It's not like we founded this company. It's like, oh yeah, we're focusing on this. It's like, no, we're looking at the patient on the table, and we've got multi-disciplines looking at this, right? From a technology perspective, from a shipper perspective, from an operator perspective, looking at the challenges and looking at the opportunities for the customers and saying, hey, we know what we can do, we know how we can drive value. And it isn't necessarily just the yard operations themselves. If you do something effective within yard operations, you know that you have other effects on the end-to-end, movement of goods, whether or not that's transportation or warehousing. And so that's, to us, is like the opportunity. It's like really redefining what this means to deliver these services and helping and leaning into the big shippers to really drive the value that they're looking for. And they were promised, actually, this is part of, in my old days, it's like, hey, the promise of technology was to deliver something for you. Whereas the vast majority of the shippers are not getting the value they were promised from their technology solutions. And then they're on the technology hunt for the next widget to do that. Mm-hmm. It's like, you don't need to hunt for the widget. You just need to have a different perspective of how you're using your existing widgets and maybe complementing it with something that you've got a few gaps in here and there. But you don't need to go on a hunt for something that you don't need. And I see this time and time again with, engaging with our customers.
I see. I think your story, you went electrical engineer on ships, running like redundant systems and very hands-on. And then it seems like you went to a very softer side at Oracle, where there's not so much hands-on stuff. It feels like tangible. And then now you're back into hands-on, tangible world of logistics and supply chain again. It's kind of fun to see how everyone has a little bit different career trajectory and approach, and how that informs the next step of what they do in their career.
Yeah, no. Just to emphasize what you just said, because it's a good observation, right? From my perspective, it's like, man, it's like you've done CRM, you've done ERP, you've done, a few things. It's like, why is that not exciting to you? Well, from my perspective, when you're looking at technology enablement, you're looking at, optimizing something. When you're seeing how that impacts the physical world, real time, that's just massive, right? When you actually see that, that's just like, that's very tangible. Now I know, when you're buying a pair of Nikes, I know exactly how that's gone through the supply chain to my feet, right? It's like, I've seen it. I know what it looks like. I know the challenges. I know, especially during the pandemic, there's a lot of challenges associated with the movement of goods at that time. And the yard became an opportunity and a problem for many during that time. And so when you're seeing the movement of goods, and you're seeing the application of your organization's wherewithal to actually influence that in the physical world, it's actually pretty immense. So that's why, from a technology guy, it's much more meaningful, much more impactful, that connection between physical and virtual. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
A while ago, you touched on the fact that this is a team sport, that supply chain is a little bit like operating like a team. And it kind of spurred me to want to dive into just a little bit of understanding of what do you do for fun? What hobbies, sports, I want to try to keep pulling on this. Who is Matt, the person in this story a little bit? So how does that kind of come into play, like hobbies and interests outside of work?
My sport is rugby.
Okay. All right.
So what rugby? Okay. Well, look, if I don't know if you know what rugby is, but it's 15 players, all shapes and sizes, different skill sets. Okay. And they have different roles to play in winning the game. And so that's when we look at a team, it's understanding how to maximize and bring all that together for the maximum effect of delivering value to the customer. And so really, from our perspective, that's what's fun, because this is more varied. This is a much more varied background of people and talent than if you were just traditionally doing a technology play, right? And so from my perspective, that's what's exciting about this. We're all unified in the calls. We're all excited about what we're doing, and how we're working with the customers. And so, yeah, that's really when we say team sport, it's team embracing what every individual is bringing to the table, because they are bringing something. They wouldn't be in YMX already if they didn't bring something to the table, for sure.
Right. Speaking of that, and before we kind of dig into industry technical type stuff, I would like to kind of like chat with Matt, the founder and the business builder. And right now, what does it mean that you've got a company that is on cups, that people are talking about, that up until some point not too long ago, this did not exist, and you had to, have the intelligence and the leadership and the vision to be able to say, let's go build a solution to go solve problems. Like, how has that entrepreneur journey been with creating YMX?
Uh, so so really, from my perspective, um, as I said, I've spent so many years in this area. I know what folks have tried to do to drive value in this space. I know the dynamics of the market associated with each, like the maritime world, marine terminals is very different. The dynamics, the players, the challenges, uh, is very different. The mission critical nature of terminals, marine terminals, very different than inland distribution. Inland distribution, in terms of capital invested and things like that, is very different too. So for me, it's like I've had this broad experience over the years in all of these different areas associated with this. I've seen, I know all the market participants. I know the market participants. I hear what the customers are saying in terms of what the problems are. So that's why I'm not joking when I say this is 10 years in terms of clarity of vision around what it would really take to drive the value to the customer. So this was something that for sure was something that I wanted to do even when I was running Pink, the number one YMS company. This is something that I really, really wanted to focus on and really redefine what it meant to do this. And so I had a clarity of vision, and then it took, and everything happens for a reason, Nathan. You know this, right? Everything happens for a reason. It's like at the end of the day, things fall into place when it's meant to fall into place. And so it was only up until the last couple of years did it fall into place. There were a couple curveballs along the way, but everything happens for a reason, and we are where we are because of all of the sequence of events to get us to where we are. And I think the other big thing, it's not like I'm starting from scratch. I know people, supply chain is a relatively small industry. Everybody knows everybody, right? So a lot of people in the industry know who I am. They know what I'm about. They know, and in the and the team too. They know what they've done. They know what they've contributed, and so it's not like this is ground zero. This is not, it's not like we're starting from scratch. We've already got a thriving business. We're already growing at a rapid rate. Well, growing faster than what anybody could expect, because of what we're doing resonates. Okay, so it's been a long time in the coming. When you believe in something, there's a sequence of events, things fall into place, and it isn't luck. It's putting yourself in situations where the outcomes actually materialize. Okay, so it isn't luck. It's just making sure you have that clarity of vision. You can understand what you're trying to do, and things fall into place and get aligned as time goes on. And so it was an alignment of several activities to get us to where we are today. And now we're in execution mode, right? So that's it. I mean, it's not really, I don't know, there's no formula, there's no secret formula, right? But having clarity of vision, like you've got clarity of vision of what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. And the only way of measuring whether or not you're making an impact or you're being successful is the engagement associated with what you're doing, right? So we get that positive affirmation on a daily basis, and I'm sure that you do too. So that's really it, right? If you're not getting that affirmation, it's like, okay, you're either doing something wrong or you're focusing on the wrong thing, right? That's not what we're seeing today. So clearly, there's an opportunity. Clearly, the opportunity is there. It's large. I understand what the market dynamics are. I understand what the market sizes are. I understand what the market participants are, strengths and weaknesses. There's more than enough to go around. We don't need to dominate and control everything, right? We don't need to. And I would say that to be the number one in the space, you don't need to grab more than 5% of the available market, right? So that just tells you the opportunity for what we're trying to do. There's significant opportunity. It's just that the buyer needs to be educated in terms of what could be done. And when you start focusing on the areas of opportunity and like, hey, did you realize? You may not have realized, but here's something that you could be thinking about, irrespective of whether or not you use us or somebody else. It's like, just start thinking about this, and it has a positive impact. The market is there, and we're going to satisfy the wants and needs, but we're not going to get over our skis in terms of over promising, under delivering. We know what we can deliver, and we're just going to continue to execute. And really, at the end of the day, it is focusing on the customer. I mean, I know that's overused and overabused in terms of some people say put the customer in everything. We are focusing on leading the customer to a vision, not necessarily focusing on their near-term priorities, understanding what the issues are that they can't even articulate today, because we've seen so many things. We want to guide them with a roadmap into the future. You see what I mean? So that's part of the partnership that we want to have with the customer, is saying, look, we understand what your problems are today. We can solve that from day one. Then we'll put you on a roadmap to a future that is a better place than where you are today. We're going to solve a lot of things from day one, but then we're going to solve many other strategic things going forward. And so that's what we continue to work on. That's what we're continuing to get validated on. That's what we want to lead our customers down the path. And say, so far so good.
So far so good. I like it. It's, and also I really appreciate that you adopted the color blue in your color scheme. I've got a thing for blue, so you definitely check that box.
So again, Nathan, you asked very good questions. It's like, Matt, why is it blue when pink was red? Well, there's as you know, color means a lot, right? So the reason why we chose blue was trust. Okay, so when you look at companies like an IBM or an SAP, it exudes trust. Believe in it, right? We are transparent. The way that we work with customers, it's like, if something's wrong, but we're fixing it. But at the end of the day, trust us to guide us into the future, right? Yeah. We're not going to obfuscate. We're not going to mislead. We're not going to do anything that is shady at all. And I just see so many examples of that in the industry in general. So we're all about trust. So blue is a good color for that. And that's what we're all about. Yeah.
That was such a more sophisticated reason for selecting blue than I could.
It's the truth. It's the truth. It's the truth.
I like it. Well, let's talk a little bit about, you've talked a little bit about the perspective and the vision and whatnot. And so maybe we can take a minute to just kind of, from your perspective, give a quick state of the yard logistics sort of industry right now. It's a place that you all have strong competency in and that y'all are tackling, but what's the current situation? What are y'all hearing out there in this space?
So yeah, it is very interesting when you look at the market in general. You look at the messaging that we're giving the market. There's a lot of people that are paying attention because they know who we are. They're paying attention. There is some form of emulation associated with what we're doing too, right? People are emulating our words, our approach, our education. So that that's a sincerest form of flattery right there, right? So we ourselves are making sure that we're very clear in articulating what the challenges are in the market that need to be addressed. Okay, that's what we're spending our time educating for the most part. But if you just reverse back, okay, I think we just posted something about this recently. But there is a timeline of the evolution of yard operations, right? Going back to the start of the conversation. What is the yard? Well, in the old days, nobody knows the impact of the yard. And then when drops really, become a bigger thing, and people did drop loads because it addressed some of the inadequacies of the supply chain, and so became a lot more popular. And it's a very popular approach here in North America. So then people started to pay a lot more attention to it. So customer or shippers and logistics providers started to provide those services. Okay, and it's today like. If I'm a 3PL, I do, whether or not it's DHL, Ryder, or NFI, whoever, they're providing those services as a suite of services. They may have a domain expertise in one specific area, but they're saying, hey, we don't necessarily understand this, but we're going to provide it, right? So that really started to happen back in the 80s, 90s. Then what you saw was logistics providers. There was a couple of logistics providers that said, hey, you know what? We're going to just focus on the yard. And so, late 90s going into 2000s, there were some logistics providers that were just focused on that. Okay. Then you saw, hey, we see all these logistics providers trying to provide services, but us technologists, right? Pink being one, I think you can do that a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
So then the YMS market, the yard management system market, came into effect, right? The it early 2000s going into 2010. Okay,
Okay.
so the momentum really came in 2010, and same for Pink, right? So it's like 2010 to 2020. That's the momentum. So, but now we have a plethora. We have a red ocean of YMS providers, and we have a red ocean of all of these little widgets that are latched on, right? So if you go on, I mean, the perfect example is gate acceleration with computer vision, right? So that's like a perfect example. There are many providers that are doing that, right? Or EBOL, right? So there's like during the pandemic, how do we have a touchless gate transaction, right? Well, the driver could scan the document, blah, blah, blah. So these are all these fringe applications, fringe capabilities. So like driver pre-check-in, things like that. So around the yard management system. But there's a plethora of those systems. And going back to what I said earlier on, is they're all trying to grab a limited market size, right? It isn't the size of a TMS or a WMS market. I kind of gave you the numbers earlier. And out of that spend, if I'm a big shipper and I'm spending 50 million or such on yard operations, including all the services, the assets, the drivers, and everything, I'm probably spending less, maybe 1/5 of that on the actual technology associated with it. Okay. And it still hasn't delivered the value that was promised. So today, what we have, and this is part of the next evolution of the market, and that's what we're all focused on.
Yeah.
The value is at that intersection between operations and technology. If you understand the process, people, technology more than anybody, then you can really drive that to the customer in a much more effective way. So forget about trying to pick the widget in the red ocean of solutions out there. And generally speaking, I see this too. There's a lot of fatigue. Hey, we're doing this. We're doing 10 gate pilots right now. It's like 10 different solutions. Yeah. Wow. It's like, what on earth are you doing? Right. That's like, okay, it may be like a pilot or something like that, but it's like, you've got your people distracted, focused on all these things, when really what you want is somebody that understands this to come in and say, well, hey, this is how you're operating today. Okay. This is how your business is going to be changing over time. Fix my day one problems and give me a roadmap for a future. That's what's different if you just focus on operations and technology in totality. So that for us is what we're all about. And so I think it's the next wave of focus for companies, or companies like us. Okay. Mm-hmm. But clearly, in terms of the team, in terms of what we're doing, in terms of the wherewithal and the IP that we have associated with looking at this, we clearly feel like we're very differentiated compared to anybody else in the marketplace. So, but that's not to say, we can solve all your problems. Maybe, hey, go to a competitor. It's okay, right? At the end of the day, we know what we can do. We know what we can deliver for maximum value for you. Yeah. And so that's really what we are seeing in the market today. So today, shippers are saying, I've deployed all these technology solutions. Most of them are saying, I'm not getting the value out of these. In fact, some of them are saying, I'm not even using these technology solutions today. Yeah. We've deprecated the usage of these. We are deploying and testing pilots. We got pilot purgatory going on all of these solutions, as opposed to step back. What's the problem you're trying to solve? It's like, what are the problems you're trying to solve? And engage an organization that can help that with you. So that's the state of the union associated with the yard operations today. There's a red ocean of technology solutions, a lot of fatigue, a lot of pilots, no value, problems still exist. That's it.
Yep. Funny story. If I were to back up for a minute here, you talked about 2007, 2008, 2009 is like where the kind of just the infancy stages of YMSs were coming out. Funny story. My very first internship was at CEVA Logistics when they opened up a facility here on DFW Airport. Part of my project was to make a YMS, their first YMS, in Excel. And so that was a big part of my project of my internship was to DIY a YMS for a 150 trailer parking spot facility. Yeah.
And when was that? 2000 and what?
2008, 2007.
Okay, well, just so you know, That is still happening today. It isn't Excel, it's in Google Sheets. But
Yep,
I
yep.
see that. I see, hey, congratulations, Kaizen Initiative. Congratulations, Bill, for doing Google Sheets YMS. Yeah,
Yeah.
instead of pen and paper, that's a massive upgrade.
Whew,
But
yeah.
it's like, what on earth? That's not solving any problems, you know? So yeah,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
happening today.
Yeah,
So
so
again,
it seems like so it went from pen and paper to Excel, Google spreadsheets to proper, full point solutions and YMSs, and now it feels like so many areas of supply chain are now moving toward this concept of operating systems, where there's so much more involved in one package, and so there's warehouse execution systems, WESs instead of WMSs, and so is there YMSs moving toward yard operating systems or execution systems now?
well, so and to be very, 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 very clear, okay, a yard operating system is not just the technology, right? It is
Okay.
not the technology. It is the operational framework. So, for example, when we come in to a customer and they say, um, if they already have a YMS, right? Chances are they haven't got the value out of it for sure, 100%. Okay. Um, and so it's like, you don't have to swap out the technology pieces that you have that you think are driving the value. We will embrace and we'll plug that into a yard operating system. Our operating system is how we operate. A YMS is like, how do I orchestrate and task my drivers with a queue and maybe do gate check-ins, right? It's like, that's that. It's like, okay, so what are you doing about labor? What are you doing around asset utilization, optimization? What are you doing around sustainability? What are you doing around, a more complete vision around how that site is operating? I don't know how many, and Nathan, you've been in this industry a while, you've seen this too. I don't know how many schematics that I've seen that articulate the complexity and the sophistication and the technology enablement within the four walls. When was the last time you saw a schematic in the yard? Never,
Yeah, well,
never.
since my little internship and I did it in Excel, yeah.
Well, but even so, and I've worked with the largest companies uh, that are on the planet from a
Hmm.
from a yard perspective. Okay, they don't exist. They do not exist. Okay, so that's why when customers engage with us, it's like, okay, that's interesting. I've never seen that before. I've never seen that approach before. I've never seen anything like that before. So the YMS is just a one small sliver from a technology footprint. It's broader, and then from a operating system, it's like people process technology, right? Just keep on going back to that.
Yep.
And we embrace everything associated with our thesis is everything, including autonomy as well, right?
Hmm.
The autonomous yard trucks do not execute 100% use cases associated with inside the four fences and four walls. Do not. But do they have a role to play? Absolutely. But it has to pencil out. Okay, it
Yep.
has to pencil out. It has to drive the value for the customer at the end of the day. So yeah, I think to your point, we spend a lot more time focusing on a yard operating system because the challenges, the value, the focus is broader than just the YMS.
Yep.
There's,
Yep.
the YMS in isolation does not drive the value. And it's not just a technology footprint, it's an operating framework in terms of how we do business and how we lean in. So if you came to me and say, "Can I buy your yard operating system?" It's like, yeah, that means buying our services. It's not something that you go and log in and it controls all this thing for you. It's
Yep.
it's our DNA. It's our differentiation.
You touched a while ago on autonomy in the yards, and so I kind of wanted to like kind of pull on that thread a little bit and ask about a hot topic in the industry, which is the diesel versus EV versus, just the different powertrains, I guess, that are out there
Yeah,
and available.
yeah.
Kind of what's y'all's perspective on that debate?
It's not a debate.
Not a debate.
It's no debate here. When you look at the powertrain, when you look at what's the appropriate fuel, again, it's customer centric. It has to align to what we're trying to do with the customer. Like we have one customer that's big on scope 3 emission reduction, right? It's like that's a big strategic focus. Not only is it in the yard, but over the road too, right? Um, so so EVs is the preferred uh, method, the preferred powertrain associated with that. For us, it is very customer centric. One thing I would say is there's a lot of FUD around EVs. I would say there's not, from a transportation perspective, the yard use case is a perfect application for EVs. It pencils out. It's a much better experience. It does reduce the emissions. It does reduce the noise. Our drivers love the experience. It's much more reliable, right? There's just so many things associated with EVs, why it makes sense. So that's why we prefer to actually lead with EVs, right? Because it's actually better uptime, better asset, better utilization, better. It does, say from a financial standpoint, it pencils out. There's not really a whole lot of difference between the two. So we prefer, but at the end of the day, it depends, right? Some customers are saying, look, we don't have, that would fork another project to say, hey, we need to do an infrastructure upgrade. We don't have the available capacity in our large distribution center. I get it, right? But again, it's like that may not be a day one activity. Maybe you introduce that later. So there's, from our perspective, there's no debate. Both are good for different purposes, but in our mind, EV does check more boxes in terms of the overall experience, but they're both. And if you're working with yard truck manufacturers that are really delivering quality product, either is great. And so we've been very lucky to be dealing with some good manufacturers. And so one thing's for sure, EV's not going away, especially with, there is some headwinds around incentives, etc. But even without the incentives, it still pencils out. But it's still being adopted, especially with bigger companies. Some of them have already got 70% adoption, 80% adoption rate of EVs within the yard. So there's a lot of commitment to it. And it's like, we deal with either. It depends on what we're trying to do for that customer and where they are in the life of that, right? And they've got different strategic regions to lean into EV or not. And really, at the end of the day, driving the maximum value day one and having a roadmap for future optimization is what we're all about.
Yeah, for sure. As we wrap up here, Matt, could you kind of just give a quick forward-looking perspective on what lies ahead, for the industry, but also maybe for YMX?
Well, so we are going to continue to drive maximum value to our customers, for sure, 100%. I think what you will see is a general understanding that in the industry that these areas, they've tried to extract as much value out of it in terms of negotiate from a cost standpoint. If you talk to the people that are in this industry and you talk to the people that are providing these services, they differentiate based on price and cost. They don't differentiate based on value provided. Okay. So from our perspective, it's like, I get the price, but what is the value that's being driven, right, into the organization? How do you understand what the problems are? Do you understand what the impact is to your operation? That whole area is like a podcast in itself. Okay, but really, right now, if you look at who are the buyer for these services, how they're buying these services, it's very clear. It's like all they care about is the cost, not the outcomes. Okay, and so that's what we'll see and over time is that people will understand really what the yard is. It's still a deep, dark secret. And so we're going to spend our time educating with case studies, real case studies around, and it depends on each individual, in each industry segment, what the impact of the yard is. If you look at this differently, value, blah, 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 blah. So it's like educating, real world examples, proving if you do this differently, what are the outcomes that you're driving towards? So focus on the outcomes, you focus on the value, okay? And the price takes care of itself, right? If you're focusing on optimization, right, you have the eye on the prize. And if you have somebody that is really driving you to those outcomes, again, trust, transparency, execution, you'll get to where you want to be. And that's really what we're focused on. And the market will start to understand that. And we'll start to see competitors, more valued competitors. And that's great. More competition uplifts the entire market. That's exactly what we want to have happen. So, yeah. So the future is bright in this deep, dark secret of the supply chain called the yard.
Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective and what you've been building and doing over at YMX. Again, I'm a big fan, and I think we'll probably bump into each other at some conference or show or event here soon.
I'm sure we will. Thank you so very much.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.